Well, it was once upon a time, once a long, 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 long time ago. Back when things were first beginning, when everything was happening for the very first time. For the very first time. You know, and back then, time behaved a little bit differently than it does now, right? Back then, time had not yet been domesticated. You know, you couldn't trap it in a clock and hang it on your wall or on your wrist, or it wasn't stuck inside of a cell phone. It was alive. Time was alive, and it moved and danced and did its own jig, did its own rhythm. It was like a heartbeat, right? And everything else that was alive moved and danced to that rhythm of that heartbeat. Oh, I'll tell you a secret. That time still exists right now. It's a lie that we're in this linear time. Allow the drum to take you there. Allow the drum to take you there. Allow the drum to take you there. For it was in a time like that, it was in a time like that Coyote and his wife were so in love with each other. Oh, they were so in love with each other. And all the beings would sometimes try and get a little bit close to them. You know, get a little close to them to see if a little bit of their love would rub off on them. It was a sweet time. And they laughed and they celebrated their love often. As you well know, this is one of the old stories. Can't stay good forever. And tragedy struck. His wife got ill, and she died. And for 3 days and for 3 nights, Coyote cried and wailed and cried and wailed. Oh, my beloved! Oh, my number one! Oh, the sweetest one! How can I live without you? Oh, he wept and he wept and he wept and he wept. 3 days, 3 nights. And it seemed that all this weeping, the kind of true tears, you know, the kind when you hold nothing back, when there's no barriers, it all comes through. 3 days, 3 nights. And it seems that it caught the attention of the spirit of death. And the spirit of death came and said, Coyote, why is it that you're weeping so? And he said, oh, my wife. I'm never going to see her again. I miss her so much. How can I live? How can I live? And he said, and the spirit of death said, well, what if I tell you that I could bring you to her and you can see her again? Oh, that would be most excellent. Coyote thought that was a brilliant idea, and he said so. And the spirit of death said, well, I can do this, but you must do exactly as I say. Exactly as I say and as I do. Do you understand? Oh, yes. Oh, I long to see her so much. Why would I do anything different? Why would I do anything? Of course, of course, of course. And so the two of them started off on a great journey. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and eventually they came upon this great plain. And it was this barren plain. There wasn't really anything in the distance. But the spirit of death looked out, and he said, oh, look at all the horses. It must be a roundup. And then he kind of nudged Coyote, and Coyote's like, oh, look at all those beautiful horses. Oh, yeah, it must be a roundup. I mean, he didn't see anything. There was nothing there. Right? But he was going along, and they continued on, and they continued on until they came to another area. There was a little rock there, but that was it. But the spirit of death reached up, and he said, look at all these service berries. Oh, they look so delicious. And he pulled down what seemed like it was a branch. Coyote didn't see anything, but it seemed like a branch, and he picked it, and he put it in his mouth, and he said, oh, that is wonderful. kind of elbowed Coyote, and Coyote went, oh, these service berries. And he reached up and he pretended to eat all these service berries, and the two of them had a good lunch for a while. And then they moved on. And they wandered and they wandered and they wandered. Still in this vast plain that was just empty and barren. But eventually they came upon a place where the spirit of death said, we are near now. We are very near to the longhouse. This great, large longhouse, which is the land of the dead. And so they walked a little more and they made it there. And he said, the spirit of death said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to see if I could find your wife for a moment. Excuse me. And he lifted this imaginary flap, or what seemed to be imaginary. And he went under and he was gone for a while. And then he came back and he said, oh, your wife is here. I found her. Let's go in. What you're going to need to do is reach down and lift up the flap and go under. Well, imagine this. He didn't see any flap. He didn't see anything. But he followed. He, mimicked exactly the spirit of death. What he did, he reached down, ducked under, and went. It didn't look any different. But death said, oh, sit down right here. You're sitting down right next to your wife. And he said, she is going to prepare us a meal now. And so he sat there and they waited for a while. And then death said, oh, look, the meal has been placed before us. Let us eat. And Coyote just kind of reached into the air, putting this imaginary food into his mouth. And after some time, death said to him, things are a little bit different here. Things are a little bit different here. It's not like your world. When it is night in your world, it becomes day here. And the reverse is also true. And so just sit here for a little bit. And so they sat and waited until the sun started to go down. And as the sun started to go down, Coyote started to notice surrounding him was this great shimmering that was happening. And he started to hear all this noise. And then it got darker and darker, and as that happened, these images, the shimmering around him, became clearer and clearer and clearer, until finally he saw he was surrounded by people. And he was in the land of the dead. And you know who was sitting right next to him. My beloved, my number one. Oh, I get to see you again. And they hugged and they kissed, they embraced. Oh, it was such a sweet union. And then he started to notice who else was there. All these other people who had died, all of his old friends. They were all there, and he started walking up and down this great longhouse, meeting with all of his friends, and dancing and singing and feasting and drinking and partying and conversing. And he had a fantastic time. All night long. But soon, the sun started to come up. And everyone started fading, and the spirit of death said to him, if you want to see everyone again, do not leave this spot during the day. You cannot leave this spot at all. And so eventually the sun came up high in the sky, and Coyote just sat there all day long under this intense, intense heat. And he had no water, he had no food, and he's just baking there under the sun, but he did not leave. And that night, everyone appeared again. And he got to hang out with his wife and all of his old friends. And this happened day after day after day, or I should say night after night after night. Throughout the day, he would be baking under the hot sun, and at night, he would get to see all of his old loved ones. Until it was that one day, the spirit of death said to Coyote, "It is time for you to leave. And you can't stay here forever. You must go home." And Coyote said, "But I love it here so much. All my friends are here. My wife is here. I love it." Death said, "And yet you cannot stay. You cannot stay. But I will tell you this. You can bring your wife back with you. You can bring her back with you. But don't be a fool, Coyote. Don't be a fool. There are certain conditions or certain things that you must do, or more to the point, not do. Between here and home, there will be 5 mountains that you must cross. And, I'm noticing there's an echo going on right now. I'm going to move that. There's going to be 5 mountains that you will cross. And during that time, you must not, under any circumstance, touch your wife, no matter what impulse overcomes you. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. 5 mountains, I will not touch my wife until after I cross that 5th mountain. Great. And with the blessing, the 2 went off. And during the day, they would climb the mountain, get to the top, and go down. And each day after they would climb a mountain, they would camp at the base. And they would build a fire. And the 2 would sit across from each other. And on the first day, she was nothing more than barely a glimmer. But each day, she became more and more solid, more and more there. Until finally, they were at the base of the 4th mountain, right? They had one more day to go. That was it, one more day. They built a fire, and she was fully there. I mean, it was her. It looked like she was fully back. And you know, that fire was there in between them. But they were talking. They were whispering sweet things to each other. They were spouting love poems and other poetics to each other. There she was, looking so beautiful. You know how it is. Your loved one is right there. And she's right there. How can I not touch? How can we not touch her? How? You know? They're right there. And Coyote, this joyous impulse came over him. And he jumped up, and she said, no, don't. And he ran over, and she said, no, don't. And he went in and he embraced her, and she was gone. Just like that, she had completely disappeared. No, where did you go? What have I done? No, please come back, please. My beloved, where are you? Where are you? Well, and obviously, the spirit of death heard what happened, knew exactly what happened. And went and said to Coyote, "Oh, you idiot! One more day! One more day! If you just held out for one more day, all people, all creatures, everyone would have been able to return from the dead. Everything was about to change. But because you couldn't resist, death is going to stay the way it is. And no one can return." Oh, no. And the spirit of death left Coyote alone. Totally alone. What did he do? For 3 days, 3 nights he wept. The same kind of tears, those true tears. He wept, that deep grief. And then he decided he was going back to the land of the dead. So he started on that journey. And when he came to that first spot and he recognized it, he said, "Oh, look at all the horses. It must be a roundup." And then he continued on and he continued on until eventually he came to another place. And he reached up and he pulled, and he said, look at these delicious service berries. And he picked a berry, and popped it in his mouth. And then he continued until he got to the place where he believed the land of the dead was, and he lifted the flap, this imaginary flap, and ducked down and sat there, pretended to eat some food that maybe his wife made, and then just sat there in the sun waiting for night to come. And night came, and you know what? He was just sitting there all alone. All alone. The land of the dead wasn't there. He was just in a prairie, in a field, sitting there, weeping and wailing. And they say that on some nights, if you listen, you can still hear Coyote wailing away, crying and weeping to this day. At least that's what they say. That's how it happened. And that is all I know. Coyote in the land of the dead. Thank you so much.